How's it going, guys? This will be my presentation on rigging safety. It's going to be a tailgate style meeting. Um, Recently, we had an accident regarding rigging, and I figured we'd kind of do a summary based on what happened and basic safety principles while rigging and understanding what's going on when you are rigging. At the end of this session, you should understand proper communication techniques and proper intuition using a friction device, also known as a porter wrap. You will also understand the forces at hand that go into rigging, in particular, negative rigging. Um, this topic directly correlates to the accident which recently happened. Um, we use rigging normally when you are removing branches that would normally damage property or even people uh, below the canopy. Potential hazards are always dismemberment, death, or destruction of property of either yourself or other people surrounding you, including your coworkers, homeowners, or homeowners' property. Uh, to review the accident that went down, a group of three arborists, all varying in experience, were working on removing a leaning oak tree. Um, Now, they were in a training, advanced rigging training, specifically for this, but the trainers were actually not present during the most important times in this situation, and you'll see exactly what went wrong. So, to begin with, uh, the weather conditions were highly unfavorable. It was raining, it was cold. Um, no one really wanted to be there. Um, we were experimenting with using redirects and using kind of like a structural rigging system to divert all of the weight from the top of this leaning tree. So, if you know anything about leverage, you want to reduce the amount of leverage at the top of this tree that's pulling it forward and over and down. So, we had, I think it was two redirects running down the main stem of the tree, running to a another block in the woods behind the tree. Now, the tail end of this line came back towards the front of the yard where the drop zone was, and it was attached to a neighboring oak tree with a porter wrap. Now, uh, at this time, climbers and groundmen were alternating, so everyone had quite a bit of training. So, once the brush was removed, a few of the top butt sections were removed using negative rigging. Um, this negative rigging method is highly effective, works great, and in the manner we were using it in, it worked amazing. Now, because of the redirects, not as much force was exerted on the end that the ground guy was on. So, realistically, we were taking maybe 4 foot, 3.5 to 4 foot sections just so everyone had a chance. Not very heavy pieces considering it was also part of the crown almost. So, half a wrap was perfect just to let it run. You could hold it above the ornamental trees that were actually below the drop zone or below the tree where things were getting dropped. So, in this circumstance, half a friction wrap was acceptable. Um, Now, it got to the point in the day where it was around 11 a.m. Everyone had the chance to mess around with the tree, try out their equipment and rigging styles, and they sent the more experienced climber to finish the rest of the butt section, which was about 35-40 feet. And essentially, a few smaller pieces were lowered down, same rigging method, same rope, everything, uh, and everything went smoothly. Now the climber had gotten slightly impatient, and he was very wet. Everyone was soaking wet. The ropes were getting more and more wet as the day went on. So he begins to ask his coworkers on the ground if he may take larger pieces. And they actually humbly agreed. They were actually very willing. So essentially, the worker in the tree selects about a 6 foot long, about 14 inches in diameter section of the tree, looks down, asks if this is acceptable, and the co-workers say no problem. After cutting the notch, the climber is low enough in the tree that he actually cannot see the porta wrap, but he asks his co-worker, "Are you all set?" and reminds his co-worker that it is a very large piece, much larger than the other sections we were taking. The worker on the ground gives a thumbs up, says he's ready. The climber doesn't think twice and finishes his cut. There was no resistance, like there normally is with negative rigging, no bucking, nothing, and he notices that his co-worker is flying across the yard and slams into the tree that the porta wrap was attached to. Now, this ground worker was wearing rubberized gloves. It was rainy. He was standing uphill from the porta wrap, but the climber and the ground man did not communicate well enough to actually come to an agreement on what the amount of friction wrap should have been taken. The ground worker had hurt his face, he had hurt his shoulder, and essentially the rest of the tree was taken down in smaller pieces to avoid any more accidents and for efficiency. Now, to avoid the situation, there was a lot that could have been done differently. First of all, the whole job could have been avoided by wading off on that tree and finishing other surrounding trees beforehand, based on how slippery it was that day, how much of a lean this tree had. There were many things that could have been avoided. Another one being communication. Had the climber and the ground man communicated properly, and if the climber had asked how many friction wraps were taken on that porta wrap, things could have gone a lot more smoothly. Now, come to find out with further inspection, the groundman had only taken half a wrap. For a piece that large, there wasn't hardly any friction on it, even though there were redirects and all of that. He had underestimated the amount of force that was going to act on his end, and he did not let go. So injury was very imminent at that point. due to his negligence of understanding the forces at work. Another big thing was haste. The climber did not want to be in the tree, therefore, he rushed and cut corners, which led to an injury. Um, so you can prevent all of this by knowing the limits of yourself, your equipment, and your coworkers before even getting into the tree. If weather isn't perfect for rigging because of slippery conditions, wet ropes, whatever it may be, you can avoid that entirely. Um, Also, things could be avoided if you check all of your rigging equipment before actually using them, making sure all of the hazards associated with that equipment is suitable and not going to actually be an issue. Uh, Another big thing is using gloves that are actually safe for rigging and won't bind up on your hands. Knowing how to use your equipment is very important. Um, and wearing PPE. Realistically, the hard hat saved that man's life, and uh, he wouldn't have been able to go home that day without it. Um, when rigging, you should always maintain visual and vocal contact with all of the workers on that site. If you lose sight of anyone on the work site, always give a shout. Always know where they are. Count hard hats as often as you can, because everyone's lives are at stake. Um, and you can prevent serious injury or destruction of equipment or property by doing so. Um, Now, the forces at hand, even though you may be using advanced rigging techniques with redirects and porter wraps, and you could have a 4-to-1 advantage, but still the initial shock will send someone flying across a yard uh, at very dangerous speeds. Just know the limits of yourself, your equipment, and plan accordingly. Um, Here we have the quiz. Uh, what can unfavorable conditions lead to? Choose one or more. A. Haste. B. Hunger. C. Crying. D. Injury. Number 2. What is the first thing the climber did wrong in this scenario? A. Cut corners. B. Use a Blake's hitch. C. Wear PPE. Or D. Ask for water. Number 3. What could the climber have done to prevent this accident? A. Sing sweet hymns into your coworkers' ears. B. Communicate with your coworkers clearly. C. Get 8 hours of sleep. Or D. Drive 65 in the fast lane. Number 4. What could the ground guy have done to prevent this accident? Choose one or more. A. Wear proper PPE. B. Know his limits. C. Know the forces at hand and do not underestimate them. Or D. Listen to Soul Train on the way to work. Number 5. Should an all-stop have been called? A. Yes. B. No. Number 6. Was this accident preventable? A. Yes. Or B. No. The handout is simply just a review of the tailgate safety meeting. Thank you all for attending, and please post your questions, and I'm sure Christina will send them to me.